Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, good morning and welcome to Geneva, welcome to the Maison de la Paix. It's an honor and a pleasure for me to welcome you here at the Geneva Centre for Security Policy and to this first public event of the Eastern Mediterranean Initiative. It is often said that the world is facing a crisis of multilateralism. Growing complexity, competition, and uncertainty, both globally and regionally, are prompting states to look inward and challenging our belief in the value of consultation and inclusion. Building bridges with non-like-minded states in particular requires trust, and in many places such trust is in terribly short supply. Nevertheless, in a complex and interconnected world, long-term peace and prosperity can hardly be achieved without multilateral cooperation. And this is certainly true for the Eastern Mediterranean. The Eastern Mediterranean, as we all know, is home to vast energy resources and huge commercial opportunities. The countries along its coast share many common threats, including from extreme weather events exacerbated by climate change. But without inclusive efforts to tackle legal and political differences, it is difficult to see how the countries of the region will harness their full potential. When governments struggle to find common ground or lack official channels of communication, informal dialogue between experts can help to move the conversation forward. This type of track 2 diplomacy can never substitute discussions between governments, but it can help to build mutual trust and understanding, to identify common challenges and shared interests, and to generate ideas for policy makers on all sides to get out of an impasse therein. Here at the Geneva Centre for Security Policy, we provide this safe space for inclusive dialogue. And we are mostly not only a concierge for providing a venue, we also help to identify the right experts, we facilitate dialogue, and if warranted, we provide policy advice. As part of our mission to build peace together, GCSP facilitates quite a number of track 2 and track 1.5 processes in regions across the world, including Europe, Asia, and the Arctic. As a matter of fact, we run currently a portfolio of about 16 dialogue tracks. Through discrete dialogue, roundtables, and workshops, we help track 1 actors to find creative solutions to regional challenges, diffuse tensions, and build confidence. The Eastern Mediterranean Initiative, or EMI, is one of these dialogue processes. Launched in 2020 by CISPs and GCSP with the very strong support of the Swiss Federal Department of Foreign Affairs, the EMI brings together over 20 experts and former officials from the region and beyond. Its long-term ambition is to pave the way for structured multilateral cooperation and conflict prevention mechanisms in the Eastern Mediterranean. The members of the EMI have held several workshops in Switzerland and the region, and countless online meetings. They have co-written several papers and articles, including the most recent publication which proposes the establishment of an Eastern Mediterranean Conference for Cooperation. To understand the benefit of track 2 and track 1.5 dialogue processes like the EMI, one needs only to look around this room. We are joined by representatives and experts from across the Eastern Mediterranean and relevant countries who share a desire for a more peaceful and prosperous region. By coming here today, they have demonstrated their willingness to hear the EMI's proposals and engage in an inclusive exchange of ideas about the future of the region that would have perhaps not otherwise taken place. On our panel today are a total of 8 experts in consecutive panels and members of the EMI from different countries of the Eastern Mediterranean. We hope that their work over the past years will inspire you and illustrate that multilateral dialogue in the Eastern Mediterranean is beneficial and is possible. I encourage all of you to ask questions and interact with the panelists. After all, the title of the event is Building Regional Dialogue, and I hope that today's event can live up to this ambition. Without further ado, I pass now the floor to Ambassador Didier Pfirter, Swiss envoy to the Eastern Mediterranean, and also, I think, to a large extent, the spiritus rector of this initiative. Didier, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Greminger. In the name of the EMI members who have chosen me to briefly present their initiative, I welcome you to this event, with which this Mediterranean initiative is going public after 3 years of intensive work and debates. The members of the initiative have developed profound mutual understanding and a close relationship as friends over this time. They hail from academia, or among them are also former diplomats. And we are all on first-name basis and will also address each other in this way during this debate. You can find the full names, titles, and functions of the members in the documents available outside the room. The initiative has aspired from the beginning to be inclusive. Its members do not represent the countries from which they hail, but see themselves as citizens of the Eastern Mediterranean with the common cause of fostering enhanced understanding and cooperation between the states and the people who historically and culturally have much more in common than divides them. Their aim is to bring about a peaceful and prosperous Eastern Mediterranean region where differences are resolved through non-violent dialogue and permanently open channels of communication. To this effect, they have produced a series of documents with ideas and suggestions that might inspire governments, and they intend to continue along this path. Outside the room, you can find the papers on a permanent Eastern Mediterranean Conference for Cooperation, EMCC, and on the Israeli-Lebanese Agreement on Maritime Delimitation. We have also elaborated a paper on general principles of maritime delimitation in the region, but for the time being, this is being confidentially discussed with governments and not shared with the wider public. Even though I feel personally strongly attached to the region and its people, it is more appropriate to let 2 of our members, whose family history has been tragically marked by the conflicts that have ravaged the region in the past, to present their motivation for engaging in the initiative. Zuhal Mert Uzuner and Ioannis Anastasiakis. Please, Zuhal.
Thank you for this nice introduction. Thank you for this timely organization for GCSP, because we know that our region is still in a very important tension. So it reminds us to remember and to express our thoughts about what's happening in our region. Unfortunately, we know that in our region, in Eastern Mediterranean, we experience very tragic events, especially at the end of the 19th century. We experienced so sad things as individuals of our region. So we see that as a result of these happenings, we lost our families, we lost our homes, and we had to move somehow to a new motherland, so by leaving our homelands. So again, we see these tragic events are repeating. So it is important to remind that dialogue and somehow cooperation and finding a way to deal our problems in a peaceful way is very critical to find a solution, find a better way for civilians. So from that approach, we think that EMI is a very important initiative. We are so excited to be a part of this initiative, and we think that it is very important for cooperation and structural dialogue in our region to find a better way of solving problems and having a better dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zuhail. Ioannis, please.
Thank you. I'm here not only to welcome you, but also to share my displacement experience of my family. My grandparents from my mother's side were forced to leave their home at Smyrna, nowadays Izmir, as refugees in 1922. My grandmother used to tell stories about horrible things that happened then, the fear and sorrow for losing beloved persons, relatives and friends. She also expressed her willingness to return home to the land of predecessors. My grandfather never managed to overcome the trauma and psychological stress because of the atrocities during the war. His beloved brother was killed just beside him. The rest of his family dispersed in 7 areas and managed to get together again after many months with the support of Red Cross. In the 21st century, stories like my family's should not happen. Unfortunately, we cannot change the past, but may stabilize the present and save the future. Today, we witness the Israeli versus Palestinian conflict. Thousands of civilians killed or displaced on both sides. Regional friction and wars should be prevented via productive dialogue and discussion. Having said that, I welcome the EMI, East Mediterranean Initiative, which is the real tool, a platform where expert diplomats and politicians meet and try to define solutions, making proposals and policy recommendations. At this point, I would like to thank GCSP, Geneva Centre for Security Policy, for hosting this public event in the Maison de la Paix, that means the emblematic House of Peace. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ioannis and Zuhail. We have scheduled our event many months ago and could not foresee that it would take place under contradictory circumstances that underline more than any words the crucial need for this initiative. On the positive side, Greece and Turkey are today celebrating their first meeting of the new diplomatic dialogue. Of course, we like to think that this is a fruit of our work behind the scenes. Sadly, the people in and around the Gaza Strip have been struck once more by tragic confrontation. We were all shocked and dismayed by the abominable massacres and hostage-taking in the Israeli kibbutzim and towns around Gaza on Saturday, 7 of October, and want to express our heartfelt sympathy with the victims and their loved ones, and the hostages who still find themselves in an unimaginably terrible situation. At the same time, we are very much concerned about the fate of 2.3 million mostly innocent civilians in Gaza, who for over a week now have been exposed to constant bombing, lack of water, food and electricity, and more recently have been forced to displace within a tiny and totally overpopulated area from which they cannot escape. All of us, without exception, want to make an appeal for the immediate release of the Israeli hostages, as well as the respect of humanitarian law and unhindered provision of humanitarian aid to the people of Gaza. However, our group has not worked on the issue of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. While we cannot ignore what is happening in part of the Eastern Mediterranean while we are meeting, we do not want these tragic events to dominate our discussion today. Some panelists want to make a personal statement at the end of the second panel, and the following discussion provides an opportunity for members of the public who want to react to this. But for the most part of the event, we want to concentrate on the achievements of the initiative during the last 3 years, and thank you for bearing with us. Those who are accompanying the event online can ask questions via chat. These will then be read by the moderators. And you can do that even while the panels are going on. There are going to be 2 panels, one on energy as a catalyst for cooperation right now, and one after a lunch break on a regional political framework. Both panels will be followed by a hopefully animated Q&A session. I thank you all for your participation. Before we start, I need to make a short GDPR disclaimer. Please note that this is a public event in the public's interest. Photographs and media footage will be taken throughout the public discussion. If you do not wish to be recorded or photographed, please move to the blue chairs on my left-hand side. And if you have any concerns, please inform one of our staff members. I am accompanied here by Ahmed Kandil, a Senior Fellow of International Relations and Energy Politics, Talha Köse, a Professor of International Relations, Konstantinos Yalouridis, an expert on international law, and via Zoom, Lori Haitayan, who is an energy expert. I start with a question to Ahmed. Ahmed, how significant are the oil and gas deposits discovered in the Eastern Mediterranean in recent years? Where have we seen states' interests in exploitation lead to tensions? And where did they lead? Well, we know that, I guess, but maybe we don't know as well where they have led to cooperation.
Thank you, Didier. Good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure and honor to be with you today to share with you some thoughts about our new initiatives and how energy could be a catalyst for regional cooperation. I really would like to thank Swiss Ministry of Foreign Affairs and GCSP for giving me this great opportunity. Actually, as you know, the Eastern Mediterranean region holds a significant hydrocarbon resources. In March 2010, the United States Geological Survey estimates that our region has about 345 trillion cubic feet of recoverable natural gas, which is the fourth largest in the world after Russia, Qatar, and Iran. Our region also has about 3.5 billion barrels of oil in addition to 9 billion barrels of natural gas liquids. The value of all these resources is between $750 billion to $3 trillion, according to popular estimates. These resources are enough to power our region for decades, or the European Union for 20 years. As of January 2023, natural gas resources discovered in Egypt and Israel and Cyprus amount 83 trillion cubic feet. The major gas fields in our regions include Zohr in Egypt, Leviathan and Tamar in Israel, Aphrodite, Calypso 1 and Glaucus 1 in Cyprus. And yet the region remains one of the world's most underexplored areas because of not explored reserves in Lebanon, Syria, and Palestine, Turkey, and Greece. These gas discoveries represent golden opportunity for all countries and people in the region to meet their domestic energy demand and achieve their energy self-sufficiency. In addition, it could also provide these countries with enormous financial resources for exporting gas, from exporting gas in the long run, so that it can help them to solve their economic problems, upgrade their economic system, as well as achieving more political and security stability. There are a number of challenges facing the best use of these gas discoveries at the commercial level. From the perspective of many major oil and gas companies, the conditions of natural gas market in the European Union and the global gas prices represent a significant uncertainty for the profitability of most of natural gas projects in our region. Prices of natural gas have been extremely low due to a trend of slowing global demand, except for the period after the Russian-Ukrainian war, of course. But this trend is come back again now, and the world prices for natural gas is still very low from the perspective of profitability of major oil companies. Also, gas exports from our region face extreme price competition in the European markets from those coming from the United States and Qatar, and consequently challenge the profitability of most gas exporting countries. There is also an agreement among major actors. There is no agreement among major actors in the region over conflicting claims regarding the ownership of these resources and the demarcation of maritime borders. Heightened political tension and conflicts over the unresolved demarcation of maritime borders between Cyprus and Turkey and between Greece and Turkey are the most visible sensitive subject. Military confrontations and growing conflicts are still among the main obstacles to have the ability and the long-term vision to make best use of these discovered gas. As for your questions relating how these gas discoveries led to cooperation in the region, I would like to share with you some examples of such cooperation on multilateral levels and bilateral levels. On January 2019, the energy ministers of 7 countries, Egypt, Cyprus, Greece, Israel, Italy, Jordan, and Palestine, established the Eastern Mediterranean Gas Forum. This forum, the first of its kind in our region, is intended to be the umbrella for cooperation and dialogue regarding the development of gas resources in the region. This forum seeks to achieve the common interest of all its members by establishing a regional natural gas market and rationalizing the cost of infrastructure for the export of natural gas, thereby increasing the competitive sale of gas in overseas market. Taking into account that Israel and Cyprus doesn't have any big market for recovered gas and also doesn't have the infrastructure to export this gas outside, Egypt become very important option for these 2 countries to export their gas discoveries. Egypt has advanced gas pipeline infrastructure. It has also 2 liquefaction facilities on the Mediterranean Sea, so that it might provide the only option for these 2 countries to export their discoveries. Egypt entered also an agreement with Israel to buy the Israeli gas discovered in Leviathan oil field. We have a huge deal with Israel that value $19.5 million to import 85 billion cubic meters in the coming 15 years. Egypt and Cyprus also signed in September 2018 the first agreement of its kind in the region to establish a direct pipeline to transport gas from the Aphrodite gas field to Egypt, LNG facilities on the Mediterranean Sea. The cost of this pipelines is about $1 billion and will start working in year 2024. On February 21st, Egypt in 2021, Egypt and Israel also agreed to link the Leviathan gas field in Israel with the facilities on the north coast of Egypt. Many countries in the region also reached a maritime demarcation agreements, including the latest one between Lebanon and Israel in December 2022. Finally, Egypt also signed with the Palestinian Authority last month an agreement to develop the Gaza Marine offshore natural gas, which contains more than 1 trillion cubic feet of natural gas, an amount which exceeds the needs of the Palestinian people. And one real benefit of EMGF is that Israel, for the first time, recognized the Palestinians' people rights of their own natural gas resources. So, as you can see, all these dynamics of regional cooperations offered us a very golden opportunity to reduce tension, and I hope this trend will continue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ahmed. I had actually forgotten to mention that our first panel is on energy, because energy was, or the energy resources in Eastern Mediterranean were to some extent the midwife of the birth of this initiative in 2020, when the fact that some countries have not delimited their maritime space and are in strong disagreement over them almost led to armed confrontation. So it was, on the one hand, an initiative in order to prevent this from worsening even more, and on the other hand, precisely as has been mentioned, an initiative to show and develop the opportunities that these resources provide, a true win-win situation for everyone. Talha, due to the competing maritime boundary claims, energy interests have often led to tensions between Turkey and its neighbors. Turkey is not a member of the Eastern Mediterranean Gas Forum, and there have been confrontations over gas exploration vessels, for instance. How can this dynamic be turned and reversed?
Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you, Didier. So I would also like to thank GCSP and Swiss Foreign Ministry for organizing this important event. So in evaluating the geopolitical landscape of the Eastern Mediterranean from a comprehensive standpoint, it becomes apparent that historical oversights and unaddressed concerns have contributed to broader misunderstandings and tensions and impeding the realization of region's full cooperative and integrative potential. So energy stands out as a significant opportunity capable of fostering collaboration. Regrettably, the nuanced consideration and understanding of energy prospect by key stakeholders failed to evolve as anticipated. So emphasizing the promotion of inclusive political dialogues, focusing on shared interests viewed through the lens of absolute gains rather than relative gains, and strategically leveraging common interests to broaden the scope of cooperation with the support of the third parties were pivotal elements absent in these prior relations, which prevented further cooperation. So the fostering of inclusive political dialogue emerged as an imperative in resolving regional challenges. In gauging the sentiments of Turkish decision makers and broader Turkish public, the initiation of East Med Gas Forum debate elicited some reactions primarily rooted in the perception of geopolitical exclusion and the broader themes of containment and isolation in the region. So that represents both the public sentiment and the politician's sentiment. So historically, parties with conflicting claims exploited each other's vulnerabilities and they tried to maximize regional benefits. This approach fed mistrust, culminating in the sentiments of geopolitical exclusion. So although the economic and geopolitical security concerns intertwine, the lack of trust overshadowed the prospect of more constructive engagement in these efforts. So within this dynamic, the East Med Gas Forum ought to have been inaugurated as an inclusive structure rather than one excluding Turkey, which has the longest shores in the East Med. A collaborative approach entails a collective establishment of terms, agenda definition, outreach to third parties, planning, and subsequent engagement of actors aligned with the established terms. The exclusion of Turkey from this equation instigated public outcry in Turkish society that led to this tension. The second challenge pertains to a focus on relative gains rather than the optimization of the absolute gains for all parties involved. A recalibration of this project's framework towards absolute gains and mutually beneficial outcomes necessitated the inclusion of key stakeholders and comprehensive consideration of the relevant issues, including some environmental challenges. Turkey was unable to play constructive roles due to the tensions with some of the key regional players in the past. As normalization unfolded between Turkey, Egypt, Israel, Greece, UAE, and Jordan, a more constructive space has emerged recently. A key vulnerability in Turkish economy lies in its reliance on energy imports, contributing to a substantial foreign account deficit. So the Turkish Ministry of Energy initiated the National Energy Project, which supported the offshore drilling along the Black Sea, Mediterranean shores, which are part of Turkey's long-term strategy. So a significant shortcoming of Turkey's national energy policy lies in the lack of collaboration with regional nations, with Russian Federation standing as the sole contributing actor to this expansive project. So, it was a difficult lack of cooperation, which also, undermined Turkey's energy policy. And finally, the third party involvement in the equation has been characterized by partisan roles deviating from an inclusive approach. Instead of supporting the inclusive process and facilitating issue resolution, third parties have opted for partisan stances. For instance, the EU's pursuit of an alternative energy route and corridor reveals as an awareness of discord among East Med littoral states, which potentially hinders the full functionality of the gas projects. The inclusion of Turkey could have fortified energy cooperation between the EU and Turkey. So instrumentalizing matters of joint interest emerged as an avenue to deepen cooperation in other fields. So as far as I can see, the earlier concerns of Turkey have come to a better understanding today. We are in a better shape today. However, the three issues that I mentioned still are significant for improving this cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Talha. Konstantinos, the Eastern Mediterranean Initiative has dedicated efforts to the issue of maritime delimitation in the complex geographic and political environment of the Eastern Mediterranean Sea as well as the Aegean Sea, which is further complicated by the fact that some coastal states are parties to the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea and others are not. Did the EMI find a way to overcome all these difficulties?
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, and on my behalf, would like to thank the organizers for the opportunity to be on this panel and the Eastern Mediterranean Initiative. As my co-panelists have mentioned, boundary disputes are an element of legal and jurisdictional uncertainty, which often tends to discourage offshore energy investments and discourage interstate energy cooperation. Delimiting the boundary removes that uncertainty and thus helps to facilitate the uninterrupted and coordinated exploitation of offshore energy resources. Now, when energy resources are present or are thought to be present in the delimitation area, then maritime delimitation becomes a highly controversial issue. So one of our main areas as EMI was seeking to understand the rules and principles of maritime delimitation, believing that if you take away the mystery of it, then you take away a great deal of the controversy. So as EMI, we aim to focus on the rules of international law, including the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, which is known as UNCLOS, and customary international law. And we reached a consensus paper, essentially articulating our common understanding of those core rules and principles of maritime delimitation. And of course, that was a very challenging task. It required a collective effort to overcome technical and legal and politically divisive issues of translation and both legal and technical. But at the end of the day, we aim to bring forth the shared values, the core principles that we can all agree on. So we saw that both the rules of UNCLOS and customary international law are there to facilitate peaceful solutions. Together, they comprise the canvas, if you like, on which maritime boundaries can be drawn. In judicial practice, and under both UNCLOS and customary international law, there is one rule, that boundaries should be equitable. The aim of the delimitation exercise is to achieve an equitable boundary solution, a solution that respects the territorial sovereignty of the states concerned, a solution that is fair, a solution that is proportional, a solution that is shaped by the relevant geography. In judicial practice, courts and tribunals, since the inception of the UNCLOS, have delivered specific methods and approaches. They have come up with a standard method of delimitation, which almost always follows the same order. Step 1, followed by step 2, and then step 3, in order to reach the solution which is equitable, and this is the solution, of course, that international law, both UNCLOS and customary international law, require. So what better answer to the question, why did you reach that solution, than to say, but this is how everyone does it, and this is how the law says we should do it. Now, the state practice of maritime delimitation, indeed the practice of courts and tribunals, have come to this conclusion exactly. And significant number of states in the Eastern Mediterranean have come up with solutions that are exactly this. Boundary solutions that are based on that approach, boundary solutions that the states that delivered them consider them as equitable. So consistently following the same practice, and indeed the regional practice in the Eastern Mediterranean Sea, the same footpath, if you like, helps to establish a clear path on which we can walk on. An identifiable path whereby states would be very difficult to deviate from. So our aim as EMI was to help make this path a bit clearer for the states, to guide them, to guide their discussion, to inform their negotiations, informal or formal, on the delimitation of Eastern Mediterranean boundaries in accordance with international law, in order to reach solutions that are fair and equitable. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Konstantinos. I hope we can see our fourth panelist on the screen now. Lori, almost exactly 1 year ago, Israel and Lebanon agreed on a deal delimiting their maritime borders. The Eastern Mediterranean Initiative members wrote a publication analyzing the agreement in March. What does the Israel-Lebanon deal tell us about energy as a potential catalyst for cooperation in the Eastern Mediterranean? 1 year on, how do we assess the state of the Israel-Lebanon agreement, and what lessons can we draw from that?
Thank you, Ambassador and GCSP, for inviting me. And congratulations on your initiative. I'm really looking forward to hear more about it, and time to read your publication. What I will share today are my own views and not related to any entity or any organization. Indeed, in the Lebanon-Israel case, energy, especially oil and gas, was the trigger for dispute resolution. At least for Lebanon, that was the main trigger. It ended a decade-long maritime dispute between both countries. The deal signed in October 2022 gave a lot to experts and policymakers to think of, and what made that deal a success at that time. So we can at least extract 6 points about that success. It was a clear process with one item to negotiate, the maritime border dispute. Incentives and willingness for both parties to solve the dispute were there. What we talk about always, the political will. The political will on both parties were there. It was a political deal more than a technical deal. It was a line in the sea agreed by all parties. It had a strong mediator with political leverage who could promise and who could deliver. And more importantly, alignment of spoilers with needs of their proxies, especially on the Lebanese side, was very crucial for the success of the deal. And finally, the involvement of the international oil companies, because without their consent to the agreement, parties wouldn't have been able to reach a deal, was very essential. So basically, this is like the what we think was the recipe for success at that time. Now, a year after the deal, not officially announced yet, but it looks like Total Energy did not find gas in Block 9, which was at that time at the heart of the deal. Would the agreement hold on now? That's a big question. Did Lebanon make the right strategic choice at that time to focus on hydrocarbons more than on the international law? Well, I guess this is something that experts will be so much happy to write about next. But more importantly, I guess, if that deal was meant to stabilize the situation between Lebanon and Israel, today, what is happening on the borders between the two countries reminds us that maybe tackling one issue and ignoring others is not the way forward for a stable and prosperous region. I will stop here, and if you have any questions on this point later, I will be happy to answer.
Thank you very much, Lori. Konstantinos, do you believe that the Israel-Lebanon agreement could inspire other parties in the region with unresolved boundaries?
Yeah, thank you for this question. The Lebanon-Israel agreement was the first agreement, at least in the region and possibly around the world, the first boundary agreement to be agreed between two countries that have no diplomatic relations, that have been technically in a state of war for 75 years. Their land boundary remains disputed, and there is a blue line that is administered by the United Nations. And yet, despite all of these grievances and the deep and divisive issues that separate the two countries, they were able, to US mediation, to deliver an agreement that the text of which delivers a permanent maritime boundary, which is, again, and I quote, an equitable maritime boundary, and this is specified again in the agreement. What also the agreement does is to provide arrangements for natural resources on either side of the boundary and across the boundary, because hydrocarbons, they do not always comply with human-made maritime boundaries at sea. So this agreement is functional, it's practical, and delivers a very useful tool to enable the exploitation of natural resources in a highly disputed maritime area. So in that sense, I would say it may well offer some inspiration, hopefully, to other countries with similar or analogous divisive issues to overcome those issues, focus on the aspects that matter. I would always say that if there are economic benefits at stake, and if the stakes are high, and there is the necessary political will and a momentum, then there is always a way.
Thank you very much, Konstantinos Talha. The Turkish Minister of Foreign Affairs has actually referred to the Lebanon-Israel agreement recently and said that this could inspire a delimitation of the maritime borders between Cyprus and Turkey without necessarily having to wait for all other aspects of the Cyprus problem to be resolved. To what extent do you think this is possible?
So, I mean, we consider the Lebanese-Israeli deal as a promising example of functional cooperation amidst significant disagreement and even in the situation of misrecognition. So for decades, the Cyprus conflict has highly adverse consequences for Turkey's foreign policy. so unfairly instrumentalized by some European politicians, it led to suspension of Turkey's EU accession negotiations. So the current stalemate is not in, in the favor of for anyone. So the current deal between Israel and Lebanon may have potential to foster cooperation in other areas. It may prompt parties to restrain themselves during moments of rising tensions. So we have postponed the comprehensive solution to Cyprus issue for a long time, preventing the exploration of many opportunities, including joint offshore energy exploration and construction of gas pipeline. So as an expert on conflict resolution, we have two different approaches in conflict resolution. So in one approach is to bring all the problems together on the table, try to address them, and try to have a much safer long-term prospect, which didn't work in the case of Cyprus. I mean, Annan Plan, Crans-Montana talks did not work. So the other option is to start with some minor issues, work with them functionally, build trust, and generate a new opportunity, new environment to deal the larger issues in a different perspective. So I think for the moment, I think this example may be some good example where the alternative conflict resolution can move forward. So I think I also interpret Turkish foreign minister's comment on these bases. So we don't, for the moment, have opportunity to address as a whole problem, but at least there is an opportunity to build on something more concrete.
Thank you very much. Indeed, this could be a very good example of creating a positive win-win dynamic, which might then also facilitate resolving other issues and achieving a more fruitful and peaceful cooperation on the island of Cyprus. Lori, I hope you're still with us and can hear us. I would like to ask you the same question. Do you see... no, actually, I'm not yet supposed to ask you this question. I jumped the question that I should put first to Ahmed. Ahmed, what opportunities for harnessing energy in all its forms, including sustainable energy, exist in the East Mediterranean, and could that similarly be a catalyst for cooperation?
Thank you, Didier, for this very important question. I think low carbon energy projects or clean energy projects have a high potential in our region because our regions has a very high potential for solar, wind energies, and as well as, of course, natural gas based projects. So it's a real and catalyst for more regional cooperation in the future. Our region is one of the most affected negatively by climate change. We have witnessed a high degree of temperature, droughts, water scarcity because of climate change, food insecurity because of climate change. So unless we cooperate together in the region to build more clean energy projects, it will be very difficult to face such negative new phenomena for us in our region. Also, the technology advancement reduced sharply the cost of new or clean energy projects that will give it more attractiveness for investors and companies to work on. Most of our countries in the region have now commitments to become carbon neutral or low, have targets for reducing CO2 emissions. We witnessed in Sharm el-Sheikh in COP27 how our countries in the regions are committed to reduce emissions, so that it's a real opportunities, especially if the region become interested in green hydrogen projects as well as regional electricity connections projects. We have a very promising project with Europe, Egypt, Greece, Cyprus, Europe connection project. And if this supported, of course, will be more showing the people of the region that we can reap the benefits of energy projects with the high potential we have now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ahmed. And now I can come back to Laurie. I would like to put the same question to you, Laurie, that I have put to Ahmed, since you're also an energy expert. So which possibilities for cooperation in other forms of energy, mostly sustainable energy, do you see in the Eastern Mediterranean?
Yes, thank you for the question. So, as Ahmed said, our region is one of the regions that are most affected by climate change. So we need to take action, and we cannot not take action at all. Basically, and what we'd like to see, it's the same passion that is put into the oil and gas projects in the region, and the same passion that we talk about like the potentials of economic growth because of oil and gas needs to be put on the sustainable energy and green energy and the alternative energies or low carbon energies, because this is not quite what we are seeing. In the popular discourse, oil and gas is always there, but less when it comes to renewable energies and other forms of energy. And this should be one thing that we should be doing in the region. And we are passionate a lot in the region. So I guess like we can put a lot of passion into that if our governments are convinced that this is the right path. So we see a lot of national projects. We've heard about many national projects, pledges to the Paris Agreement, etc. And we're seeing regional projects being designed as well, and going beyond even the region, connecting continents together. And we are also seeing agreements being signed between our region and Europe. So connecting our region through energy is important, but I think we need to be very inclusive. To learn, one example that to learn from, for instance, the EMGF, you cannot exclude people, then it doesn't function as it should be functioning. So any connection, any connectivity projects around the energy should be inclusive. And also we need to think of those who cannot be connected to this project, because unfortunately, in the region, we hope that the region could be connected one day on all levels, but today it is not. It is divided, and we shouldn't be leaving behind countries that are not connected. Especially here, I talk about Lebanon and Syria. So in these two countries, these are like two countries that are really today at the stage where energy-wise, they're like really suffering. But there is potential in these countries to really help them go through and build something that is really like good, strong, and modern. So I do believe that in Lebanon and in Syria, there are opportunities to build new energy systems based on clean and smart technologies. Like, for instance, in Lebanon, individual initiatives, like led individual initiatives when it comes to clean energy and solar energy, for instance, has led to an increase from 100 megawatt to 1,000 megawatt of deployment of solar energy. And this is just on an initiative, personal initiative. People taking action on their own out of necessity. This is a good sign, but we need to complement it with bigger initiatives on local levels, with partnerships with the EU and others. And this is important because if something we're learning about it today is like we should leave no one behind in the region, and we should always not ignore the spoilers in this region.
Thank you very much, Laurie. Please stay with us. I'm going to give you the floor right back for the concluding remarks before we are passing on to the Q&A session with the public. Please, Laurie.
Okay, so I know that this panel is about energy, but we cannot ignore what is happening in our region. So my final thought is like, I would really urge the Swiss government to initiate a comprehensive, just, and transformative peace process in the region. The worst thing for us is to go back to business as usual after what's happening. And that would not be fair to all the victims and to all who will survive this tragedy. So I hope that the Swiss government will take things into their hand and create that and co-create with the people in the region. And thank you.
Thank you, Laurie. And I'm also asking our other panelists to make a closing statement. Ahmed, please.
I agree with Laurie that military confrontation in our region are likely to delay any regional cooperation in one of very promising area, which is energy. And I think all countries and people in the region can reap the benefits of such projects if all partners in the region respected international legal rules, the principle of non-interference in the internal affairs of neighboring countries, and the relevant United Nations resolutions are applied related to Palestine and Cyprus and Libya. Here, I think Eastern Mediterranean Initiative is a significant tool and the mechanism to increase such understanding by dialogue between like-minded actors in the region. So that I really hope your support for such initiative to continue in the future. And because we need it now more than ever before, we cannot live with military confrontation in the way we have witnessed in the last 75 years ago. We're still suffering from non-reaching any political and diplomatic solution to this conflicts in the region. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ahmed. Talha, your concluding statement.
Yeah, I think the fair and inclusive political dialogues and respect for humanitarian principles are key to all the problems in the region, including the recent one. So I think we should be committed to and stick these principles. And I thank to GCSP for supporting these principles and helping our group for this. Thank you.
And finally, Konstantinos, please.
Thank you very much. Going back to my short contribution today, I would say that good boundaries make good friends. And I really hope that through the work of EMI and through discussions that we are going to have with people, both officials and non-officials from the region, I really hope we can complete the network of maritime delimitation in the Eastern Mediterranean Sea that would enable states to have greater jurisdictional legal certainty. They can proceed uninterrupted with their energy programs. And that will facilitate also peaceful solutions. So stability of boundaries means peaceful solutions. Thank you very much.
Thank you for this very inspirational statement. And now we open the floor for the audience. Please, there is the first question there. Maybe you can briefly introduce yourself, if you don't mind. If someone wants to remain anonymous, that is also possible.
If you are nowadays focusing only on Eastern Mediterranean space, there is also Western Mediterranean space. But previously, there was also other contexts for dialogue and discussion and summit. But if you are mainly focusing on energy, oil, gas, pipelines, you should know, maybe already, that first largest pipeline have been established in the world. It used to be in the Mediterranean, in the Eastern Mediterranean, from southern Algeria, Sahara, until the Mediterranean Sea, underground Mediterranean, southern Italy, until northern Italy, near borders with Switzerland, which is running since 45 years ago. And the first one, among the others, including the last pipeline from Sahara, Algeria to Spain, through Morocco, have been cutting since last year because the relationship between the Spanish government and Algeria getting hot, and Spain is the chairperson of EU nowadays. But if you are working on Eastern space, mainly focusing on that, you have to elaborate on the Western space, Mediterranean, without waiting for any question.
Thank you very much. You, sir?
Hichem Lamissi, Secretary of the G3. Sorry for my English. It was very interesting to know that it was existing relation between two countries on energetical partnership without diplomatical relation. My question is linked with the European project. It was also interesting to see that the European project was built on energetical partnership, initially on coal between France and Germany in particular, and on nuclear, like Euratom. In your vision, are there concordance, coincidence, I don't know in English, yes, or it's so different to hope with the future that energy can be and the better element for yes, a peace partnership.
Thank you. Ladies first, and then Papaluka, please, ma'am.
Thank you. I'm Dr. Sofia Galani. I'm from the Pandion University of Greece. I have one question and a follow-up question. Well, the first is to all experts. And my question is whether they actually believe that the discovery of all these natural resources in the Eastern Mediterranean is something that will encourage states to find solutions, or whether actually this will make states to become more territorial, and whether actually this is a problem in terms of finding ways to cooperate and agree on the limitation. And the follow-up question is for Dr. Yalouridis. I mean, you mentioned that the courts have gradually become more consistent and they use the three-stage test. But at the same time, we know that the test is being used to facilitate flexibility and reach this equitable solution, which means that states find it very difficult to predict an actual outcome of a case. And that means that sometimes they hesitate to use any court for a judicial settlement of the dispute. And whether, again, this is a problem, or whether you think that actually what the courts are doing is clear enough to encourage states to reach a peaceful settlement of disputes in the Eastern Mediterranean. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Papaluka.
Hi, everyone. First of all, congratulations for the great panel. My name is Christos, a background the European External Action Service, both in Brussels and Libya. I have a couple of questions and one point. One point, I think I have to also congratulate you because I think the Eastern Mediterranean, with the new security interdependencies that evolved since 2010, it deserves to be analyzed as a distinct region. It's a more niche region within the MENA, but also Switzerland can also contribute as organizations, as a country, on mediation. First question goes to the panelists is that do you foresee any Turkey, Egypt energy hub competition, even if the Cyprus problem solved or bypassed? Because keeping in mind that Egypt with Idku and Damietta are the LNGs that they can liquefy the gas from both Cyprus and Israel. To what extent they have the capacity to also bring the Egyptian and the rest of gas is questionable. And now we see with the Turks and the Israelis making some deals or trying through the rapprochement to establish a line from Israel to Turkey, and whether this will have any competition regionally between Egypt and Turkey. Another one is about the EMGF. EMGF was a great project. I think it was first of its kind, as you said. However, have we seen any tangible since 2019? Unfortunately, we don't even have in the EMGF provisions for, let's say, observer states. Some countries would like to be observers, but I know the provisions are not there yet legally, as far as I know. And I think we're missing a great opportunity for the EMGF to play on conflict resolution. Even now with the Israeli and Palestinian, even Turkey can also be part of it, of course. It needs to be built through and the last one, and sorry for taking long, it's on the EU cooperation conference that the article has mentioned. I'm wondering whether this is not the end goal rather than the approach to reach there? Because if you keep in mind, a few years ago, within the European Union, some countries proposed the same. However, it was shut down by some countries in the Eastern Mediterranean because they saw that the region wasn't ready to reach there, because they thought that, let's say, it's Turkey's backdoor into the region without reaching an overall solution, not only to the Cyprus problem, but also to the exclusive economic zones. So I'm wondering where you stand on all this, and thank you, and sorry for taking a bit long.
Thank you very much. I think we'll stop here for the first round of answers. And maybe I can refer your last question to the second panel. Actually, the paper of the EMI is not on the EU East Med conference that was suggested by President Erdogan and the President of the EU Council. So it's not a conference between the Eastern Mediterranean and the EU. It is a conference within the Eastern Mediterranean only. But indeed, there is a way to get there. It's not just because we call for it that it will take place tomorrow. We're aware of this. But let me maybe, since Konstantinos has been addressed personally, first give you the floor, and then I think the questions of Mr. Papalouka are probably concerning mostly Ahmed and Talha. Please.
Thank you, Professor Galani. I'm very grateful for your question. Can you hear me?
We don't need a mic, allegedly, it should work from above.
So on your question, whether the presence or suspected presence of natural resources can either trigger competition or cooperation, first, of course, that depends on each state, whether they choose to go in one way or another. But I would say that having a boundary in place enables that jurisdictional uncertainty on either side of the boundary, enables states to release certain hydrocarbon blocks, to invite companies to carry out the necessary exploratory work to determine the location, the size, the quantity, the quality of any energy resources in the area. If there are significant resources in the area, because that you can know only after the necessary exploratory work has been carried out, then there is an incentive to cooperate. If there are no resources in the area, at least not commercial resources, then there is nothing to fight over. So I would say, from a policy perspective, going towards the way of cooperation and interstate coordination of activities makes more sense. But again, that depends on each state's policy approach. On the three-stage approach on delimitation, in the early days of UNCLOS, we didn't have this three-stage approach. It was a very open-ended situation where there was no predictability. There is no certainty of how courts and tribunals go about delimiting the boundaries. But through consistent jurisprudence, at least we have a more precise methodology with which the courts themselves said this is the standard approach. Stage 1 followed by stage 2, followed by stage 3. So at least now we have this method which, as you rightly said, balances predictability with flexibility. Flexibility in the sense that you can apply this method on each different situation in order to reach the equitable solution in the particular circumstances of the case. That's the flexibility. No single geography is the same with another one. So I would say that at least now we have this canvas. It's up to states how to apply it. They can make their positions. Where do they think that the line should be drawn? And that is the element of flexibility. Having this, at least initial methodology, is the element of predictability, I would say.
Thank you very much. So maybe to repeat for the other panelists the questions we had the mention of the Western Mediterranean. We have the precedent of the EU being born basically through energy cooperation, whether this is something that could be repeated in the Eastern Mediterranean. We have the question of whether there is going to be competition between Turkey and Egypt. Problems are resolved and different ways can be found to bring energy to the markets. And then whether the East Med Gas Forum has produced any tangible results. Ahmed. You don't need the mic.
Okay, sorry. Well, it's a very interesting question by the Greek professors that whether gas discoveries will lead to cooperation or tension. But as the gentleman here mentions that Europe, after two world wars, after millions of victims and the casualties and the brutality between each other, could build the European Union based on coal and steel. So we hope we have a real achievement that energy and regional cooperation could be expanded to reach a higher degree of regional integration. This in history exists, but our experience in this troubled region, we have witnessed it fighting for natural resources lead to war in many areas, especially, for example, in Iraq, Kuwait war. We have also learned from the Ukrainian-Russian wars that growing interdependence based on energy operations is not a mechanism or is not a barrier for having wars between neighbors or between parties involved. And so we have 50-50 possibilities that could lead to this direction. Our responsibility and duties is to push in the constructive, positive way. And I think this is one merit of this new initiative, is to make policymakers recognize the importance of such cooperation and how it can cool the situation in the region, and how we can benefit peoples to in improving their living conditions. So this for. As for the Turkey-Egyptian possible competition regarding as for the exporting routes to Europe from the Eastern Mediterranean, I don't think it exists. Egypt facilities of LNG are working with its utmost efforts and capacities. We have already, and the region needs more of exporting routes. So I don't think, by contrast, I urge Turkey to apply for the membership in EMGF. It's a very important regional gathering that could coordinate the different efforts for the benefits of all countries. I don't agree with any competition in this regard. By contrast, this will, accelerate gas discoveries in the region and accelerate exports to others. But I think there is a problem of mistrust between Turkey and neighboring countries. Of course, the exporting route from Livingston to Europe through Turkey is the best viable economic option. But what will you do with mistrust, with unresolved conflicts between Turkey and its neighbors? EMGF is a technical institution. It's not a political one. It doesn't have any responsibility or duty to peaceful resolutions of conflicts between. It's a gathering of businessmen and companies to find out the best ways to best optimization of gas discoveries. So I think we asked for expanding its duties to include such missions and duties you mentioned, but I think still they are, studying these options because they wanted it to just focus on technical issues regarding gas. So maybe MEI could complement or to add to these efforts there, but I don't think it's a negative aspect of EMGF. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ahmed and Talha, please.
For the Egyptian-Turkish hot competition, I agree with Ahmed. I mean, the sources of energy, gas, and the final market for Turkey is different. So we have alternative sources coming from Caspian energy, Azerbaijan, from Russia, Iraq, and other sources. So Turkey initially have the policy, to have pipelines and energy hub, but this doesn't necessarily be based on just the East Med gas. So I think this will still play an important role, but I don't see it as a competitive. And the final market in Turkish case is mostly the Europe. So I think it will even help Europe to diversify its energy and gas resources. For the discovery of natural resources, I mean, as I mentioned in my presentation, I think how you look at the situation really matters. So you look from the perspective of absolute gains or relative gains. So if the parties don't trust each other, they look at from relative gain, who gets what or what is shared. But if they manage to look like in the case of EU, I think they perceived it as a absolute gain, and I think all of them gained more. So for the time being, I agree that there are some distrust due to some other issues, geopolitical issues, unresolved conflicts. So the parties cannot actually see the situation as an absolute gain. But I think the ongoing dialogues, diplomatic discussions may bring them to that situation. So we are not at the perfect, I think, the condition right now to think about an absolute gain, but there's a potential, and there are certain examples in the past that can also be applicable to East Med case.
Thank you very much, Talha. Laurie, do you also want to reply, or do you wait for the next round?
No, just a quick comment, because there were no specific questions for me to answer. But I guess one thing that we should keep reminding ourselves in the region, the governments of the region, they talk about oil and gas as if they have the upper hand. At the end of the day, most of the companies that are exploiting oil and gas in the region, these are like international or independent companies, and they're not national oil companies. And therefore, the governments can say whatever they want in their statements, that I want to become this or that, or I want the pipeline to go from here to there. If the companies are not on board of that, nothing is going to happen of that. And this is very important to remember. So, because there are a lot of talks about like Lebanon wants to do this, Cyprus wants to do that, or that country wants to do that. But at the end of the day, it's like whatever the companies who are putting the money on the table will decide that. And anything that doesn't make any sense commercially or business-wise, they're not going to make it, because they're not into the business of politics as the governments are. So we should be very clear on that. And don't forget that in the Eastern Mediterranean, we talk a lot about oil and gas, but at the end of the day, we only have two producing countries, Egypt and Israel, and that's it. And we don't have other producing countries or other producing countries, yeah. So basically, and we have like big major companies in the region, and that's maybe a good thing. But always to remember that in this sector, it's what companies would want to do, and not the political aims, objectives of the governments that works in this field. Exactly.
Thank you very much, Laurie. We have more questions from the online participants. Basically, we should go to lunch in 3 minutes, but the organizers have given us a few minutes more. So I firstly read these questions, and then maybe without answering them, we'll take a couple more questions from the audience in the room, and then we make a final round for the panelists. First question on the Turkish Foreign Minister's proposal on moving forward with hydrocarbons exploitation before a full solution in Cyprus. Are there any insights on your behalf of how Mr. Fidan sees this working in practice when there are issues of mutual recognition? And can any of your speakers see serious contacts to make this happen taking place on any level? Second question by gentleman Mustafa Al-Masri. This question goes to Dr. Konstantinos Yalouridis. Is the maritime agreement between Lebanon and Israel an equal, just, and fair agreement based on your PhD thesis content, especially the state practices? And then third one, thanks for organizing this insightful event. My question is about the future of the Eastern Mediterranean Gas Forum in light of the current tensions and the disagreements between Turkey, Greece, and Cyprus, as well as the fact that Turkey has not yet joined the forum. We have already partly answered to this, I think. And the last question, has China played a role in order to develop the cooperation framework in the area? As far as this initiative is concerned, I can reply, no, China has not been involved, but no power has been involved. We have some observer members from third countries, but no Chinese among them. So I open the floor for question from the audience. Please, sir.
Thank you, Ambassador and the panel. Mine is more a generic observation than a question. Yes, I can understand this whole thing was planned months ahead. And from the text that each of you read at the beginning, it was evident that it was all pre-planned. But in view of the recent developments in the past 7 days, don't you think we should look at it from that perspective, especially when there were references to discussions, agreements, cooperations between Israel, Egypt, Turkey, Lebanon, and so forth? Have they not been severely impacted by the recent developments of the last 7 days? And will the panel help to perhaps deviate from the original plan and address it in the context of what's happening today? And just to move on it, I congratulate this lady, Laurie, for her closing remarks. She's the only one who in a tangible way addressed what is happening in the Middle East. And lastly, I realize this has been planned ahead, but maybe the chairman can take a vote to see whether we should slightly deviate the afternoon session to address it in the light of what is happening, because that is a serious impact on whatever we have been discussing so far. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My question for Dr. Konstantinos Yalouridis. He referred to a still, I understand, let's say, non-public process of discussing between Eastern Mediterranean governments on the rules on how maritime delimitation boundaries are to be interpreted or implemented. And so, while I understand that this is still something that is not public, the question is whether in the future this will be one would be able to know what transpired in those discussions, because of course international law and the law of the sea, UNCLOS and customary international law are at this point make believe predictable enough, and there's certainty and so on and so forth. So perhaps this is something that would be interesting to discuss. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Konstantinidis.
Thank you very much also for organizing this great event, a very timely period. I have also a question or clarification to ask about the statement of the Turkish foreign minister relating to the possible use of the Lebanon-Israeli agreement, notwithstanding the non-resolution of the Cyprus problem. My impression before coming was that the statement related to how the two sides in Cyprus could find a way of exploiting it. What I heard here is that it could possibly relate to a broader issues, possibly how Cyprus and Turkey could find a way out. Is it anyhow clear? Was it a clear statement, or was it a general statement? If we can have some more insight from anybody from the speakers, panelists. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there one last question? If not, sir, if I may answer your question first on behalf of the organizers. As I mentioned initially, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict has not been part of our discussions. So I asked you to understand that it would not really be appropriate for us to go into the details of what is happening. It is terrible. It is dominating the news, we all know, but nonetheless, there are other things happening in the world, and it will certainly have an impact on the future of the Eastern Mediterranean, maybe even a good impact in the long run, because sometimes such terrible events can be also a wake-up call for everyone that unless there is dialogue and ultimately compromise, these things will continue to happen. And I think, if anything, what has happened and is still happening is showing everyone that it is to the detriment of everyone and to the advantage of no one. So hopefully this can, in the end, even promote better cooperation in the region. But for the moment, it is certainly a terrible event. There will be, as I mentioned, some statement that the second panel is more prone to this issue, but nonetheless, it shouldn't dominate the second panel and even in the afternoon discussion either. As for the other questions, I will give them to the panelists, and maybe I can at the end say a couple of words on how I see a possibility of resolving the last question. Please, who wants to start? Ahmed?
Yes, there was a question about the Chinese role in promoting regional cooperation in the Eastern Mediterranean. I think China is very interested in promoting such efforts and in green hydrogen projects. We have received many delegations who are interested in such projects, as well as for renewable energy sources. Now Egypt and some other countries in the region joined the BRICS countries, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, so that it would be an opportunity for having investment for such new projects. Such projects needs billions of dollars, and China doesn't provide any conditionality about such projects compared to World Bank and the IMF. So that I think the region, or some countries in the regions are prepared to cooperate with China in the future, especially, for example, in countries like Lebanon, Syria, and Egypt as well. Turkey also is on the radar of Chinese companies in energy projects. So I think this will be taken into consideration in the coming days.
Thank you very much. We have 2 minutes, maximum 3. Will be brief, Talha?
I think for the comments related to Minister Fidan's, I think, of course, it should be addressed by official capacity, so I don't represent. But what I can say that I think the ongoing disagreement on the Cyprus issue prevents cooperation in energy fields, or it may have potential to also, affect Turkish-Greek normalization process. So I think it is better to keep, this issue to area where we can work on it. And, the issues related to sovereignty is more difficult. However, delimitation issues without recognition can be achieved. So I think it should at least not ruin other initiatives that can move in the positive direction. So that's my understanding.
Konstantinos?
Thank you. First, to take the question from Dr. Horner about the next step on the principles of delimitation, I would like to pass this question to you as as an independent expert and member of the EMI initiative. I stand to help with any future steps and to use the principles that we delivered to facilitate future discussions. But what happens next, it's really up to the leaders of EMI. With regards to the question by Mr. Al-Masri, the online question, whether I think that the Lebanon-Israel agreement is equal, just, and fair, I thank him for this question because it allows me also to repeat the position under international law, both UNCLOS and customary international law, that delimitation is to be achieved through agreement in order to reach an equitable solution. So keep the agreement in this context, that the parties are free to negotiate freely and through consensus reach the agreement that they consider as equitable, the agreement that they feel that they can live with in the centuries to come, because the boundary, the idea of a boundary is that it should be permanent. Whereas hydrocarbons may be present, maybe not, may be exploited, maybe not, the boundary will stay there and will live through the winds and waves of history. So if Lebanon and Israel expressly stating in the document that they perceive the boundary to be permanent and equitable and in accordance with international law, I have no reason to dispute that.
Thank you very much. Lori, do you want to also add something?
Yeah, I would love to stay for a whole hour to discuss about what Konstantinos said at the end, but I'm sure that we don't have a whole 1 hour. Again, I will stress on that point only because I don't have anything to add. Again, this maritime border deal was a pure political deal based on specifics that were far away from the international law, and therefore it is really we have to watch it now and put it on our radar to see how the results of Block 9 will affect this maritime agreement. Maybe the agreement will hold without changes, but will that mean it will keep the border stable? That I would doubt. Again, we are hearing about like this had been a deal under the conditions that we get to have Kana and we give Karish to the Israelis and we don't claim Karish. Today, if Karish is producing and Kana is non-existent, what will happen to this deal and what the position of the political parties who had based their deal on that will feel about it and react about it? And will there be any kind of escalation regarding Karish? Because if we end up with a negative result in Kana, that is to be seen. And these are the caveats of the deal. And these were the risks of the deal when we were saying that don't focus on the hydrocarbons, go to the international law and then deal with that. But they were political voices. They were more interested about the hydrocarbons than the international law. To be seen. I'm sure, like you, I hope you will invite me again to Geneva to talk about this later, next year maybe. So I don't know, but thank you for the invitation. It was a pleasure to be with you, and again, congratulations for your initiative.
Thank you very much. You referred the first question to me. It's not for the organizers to decide what happens with the work of the members. It's a collective decision of the members, what they want to do with it. I think this decision will be taken in light of the reactions of the governments. The aim is that we want to help bring about solutions, and whatever helps this. Maybe a publication can also help. Maybe we think at this point in time it could hamper the whole initiative because, as we know, there are people in the region who are not in favor of solutions of any kind that imply compromise. So, depending on these reactions, whatever is best for our goal to improve the situation in the region, which is probably the decision taken. We're long overdue to have lunch to the room of my right, your left. Please be our guest. And we resume here.